Welcome back, Digitale Leute community. Also from me, this is Annalena again, and I have another guest here with me, and I'm looking so much forward for the interview. Here with me is Kern, product manager at Sendbird, and currently in South Korea, in Seoul. Hi, Casey, nice to have you.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here with you.
Nice. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Tell us a little.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Like you mentioned, I am a product manager at Sendbird. I am currently based in South Korea, where our R&D center for Sendbird is. The majority of our product development happens in South Korea. And I've been with the company for about a year and a half now, and we're doing a lot of exciting things. For those of you that may not know, what Sendbird does is to try to solve a pretty common problem among app and website creators. Oftentimes, whenever you have users that interact with each other, you face the problem of they want to continue the conversation on a different platform. That could be in a buyer and seller type situation, or a community of some sort, and then they just ask, well, just give me your WhatsApp or your email or your Skype or whatever, and that takes the user off platform. And so what we enable is to keep those conversations within your own platform, and we do that with a chat API and now a new calls API where we can enable app creators and platform operators to keep those conversations inside. So that's a lot of the work that I do is trying to sort through those problems and think through that. And that's largely kind of what Sendbird's mission is to kind of enable these communications across various platforms run by our business customers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. You're a product manager for Sendbird Calls, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
What do you do? What's your work like typically?
So I would say the primary purpose, or at least the responsibility that I have as product manager, is primarily to govern the product development of Sendbird Calls, and that usually takes there's two sides to that. The first one is kind of more on the technical side, which is the product design, the project management on the engineering side, following the typical agile methodology of actually producing and then shipping the code. The other side to it is more on the business side, working with sales and with marketing, working with customer success. And the objective there is largely to try to find a product market fit and make sure that we're hearing the right feedback that we need to from the market to be able to inform product design and product development. And then on the other side, when we do release something, understand how it's been received, whether it's meeting the needs and fulfilling the requirements that the market is putting forth. So as a product manager, kind of managing the back and forth and ultimately being responsible for the output and the direction of the product is largely what I see myself as responsible for.
That sounds like a lot of calls. What's a typical day like? Yeah,
so for me, just based on where we're at in our product life cycle, and Sendbird Calls was just released this year. So in many cases, we're still very much focused on the fundamentals, on getting the core product where it needs to be, and then satisfying the needs of our early customers. And because of that, I would say that my day-to-day is very much closely tied to the engineering sprints and the actual product development and output. So the meetings that I'm in, I'm part of the stand-ups and the sprints and everything that I work side by side with the engineering manager. I think where then the additional responsibility I have on top of that is to make sure that the sales team knows what are the newest features that have just been released? How do we articulate the value of them, and to validate, is this really what the customer is asking for? So based on that, I'll have several meetings with marketing and with sales throughout the week. Some of them regular, some of them ad hoc, some of them dealing with a new opportunity, or with in the case of an existing customer, if they're having any trouble operationally, diving into that area as well.
Okay, and we want to talk about user centricity in a B2B2C company like Sendbird is one. Who exactly are your users?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and that was actually kind of the core of what I wanted to get into, and some of the things that we've been working through at Sendbird in terms of, well, one, answering that question, who are our users? Because what Sendbird is as in the market, it's part of what's becoming known as the API economy, and we're seeing this. I think this is an outgrowth of just the division of labor, and seeing that showing up at various levels of tech product development as well. I think, for example, an obvious example is maybe Stripe for payments processing. To be able to accept credit cards requires a lot of legal and financial and risk management things that an individual small company or even larger company would just rather not do themselves. So Stripe, by providing kind of this middleware, they broker all of that for you, and then they give a very simple interface for you to interact with that. And that lets businesses focus on their own core value propositions rather than deal in the details. And so we do something similar, but for communication, for chat and calls and things like that. So ultimately, the end users, those that actually use the features that we create, are consumers. They are end users. However, as a B2B company, we can't actually think of those end users directly as our customers, because they are really our customers' customers. And that's where there's a new, I guess, level of complexity that has to be thought through very carefully as we enter product design. And the reason for that is the stakeholders kind of form a chain. And if any one of the links in that chain is broken or is weakened, then the product is at risk of not being able to deliver the value that it was intended to. So to get more specific, our product is an API and an SDK, and that is intended for developers. So a developer can download our product, put it into their product, and then refer to our documentation. They'll be interfacing directly with the public interface that we offer in our product. But ultimately, they are doing that with the objective of adding value to their end users. So when we create a new feature, we have to think about, well, who is the user for this feature? And oftentimes it's who are the users of the feature, because it's going to pass through multiple hands before it gets to the end, to the final value proposition in the hands of the end user. So when we create a new feature, we're of course thinking of, well, as an end user, for example, let's take an example in chat that's fairly common, like a read receipt. When you get a message on your text, you can see whether, or when you send a message, you can verify whether the other person has seen it yet. And in that case, the users that we identify are pretty straightforward, and that we can say, okay, as a sender and as a receiver, I need to be able to either see a checkbox or change the color or have some sort of indicator. Okay, so that's that user experience that we're trying to satisfy. But how do we get there if we're not delivering that directly, but we're doing it through the B2B2C method is that we have to make sure that the developer who uses our product to offer that end experience, that the experience for that developer is positive, and that the developer's needs are adequately met, whether that's in documentation, whether that's in naming things properly, whether that's in making sure that that the training is in place, and that the product itself is easy to use for the developer. So, when we talk about user centricity, that means that the user's in the middle. And that kind of assumes that who the user is going to be very obvious to identify. And what I'm suggesting is that's not always the case, especially when you get into these complex scenarios where the value is passed through multiple stages. So yeah, the question that we have to start asking is really, who are our users?
Yes. So you have multiple user groups. There is more than one. Do you have an idea how many user groups do you have that you need to serve?
Yeah, so taking it back to Sendbird Calls, which is what I have to deal with, I subgroup things into usually about 5 categories of users. So 2 of which are end users. So you have a caller and a callee, right? So a caller dials and a callee receives. And once they enter into the call, it's more or less they have the same experience, but they have a different experience and different needs. Dialing versus receiving a call. One needs to be able to identify their contact. The other just needs to be able to get the notification. So when we define the product requirements, we think of it in those terms. So those are our end users, callee and caller. Those are the B2B2C category. For B2B, so our actual customers, or those that work in the companies that are our customers, we would have, like I mentioned, the developer themselves. They have a completely unique set of needs as the user of the product that we actually ship, which is a developer kit. And we think about their needs in terms of documentation and ease of use and time to market. And then once that's in place, because this is kind of a software as a service, there's an operational aspect to it as well. That once everything's installed and the users are taking advantage of it, then it's like showing analytics. We have a dashboard and a portal where they can go in, check the usage, where they can make configurations, where they can also use that to help the development, and that then becomes a whole new category of users with their own unique sets of needs that don't exist with the other ones. And so those are 4. So 2 end users, 2 company users, develop and operator. Then the 5th one I identify as the decision maker. So this is kind of hard to actually call a user because they don't actually use the product in many cases, but they are a stakeholder. And they do have a particular set of needs, and meeting those needs, as far as I'm concerned, is just as much of a product development problem to solve, as much as it is a marketing and a sales one. So the decision maker is the one that's going to be seeing, in many cases, the sales collateral and the marketing material, and is going to be looking at comparing product feature lists, and is going to be making the decision. And they need to be informed and empowered. And in some cases, they need to see a demo. So for example, a lot of products will have a demo mode or like store mode or something that's intended for the sales experience. And in that case, that is obviously a product problem solve because the product needs to be able to switch into that mode. And then all of a sudden we have a new user, even if that user is just an observer. So that decision maker then is the 5th one. I should note that those 5 user groups are all external. There's a whole nother side that are the internal users and the internal stakeholders. For example, just the internal tooling that goes into development. A lot of the decisions around DevOps and for developer efficiency and things like that, internal stakeholders. We can think of those in terms of user user stories and development, as well as on the non-technical side for sales. I mentioned like a demo mode. You could say that is just as much for the salesperson as it is for the prospect. The salesperson needs to be empowered to be able to sell the product. Therefore, to some extent, that salesperson is a user of your product with a very, very different set of needs from a regular end user.
Okay, well, to sell the product, you first need to satisfy this decision maker, of course, but I'm sure you don't have endless resources. So how do you prioritize whose needs to serve when in the development process?
Yeah, so I think a lot of product management to begin with involves the prioritization tasks of some sort, whether that's what feature to ship first, or what product or product area to focus on. So one, there is no silver bullet. If we could do everything all right now, and that's obviously what everyone would like to do. But in trying to what kind of framework can we use to prioritize things, thinking about users, what users do we try to what user needs do we try to meet first? I think just given that this is business, we can't ignore the economics and the financial impacts of various decisions. So, in the same way that we would maybe prioritize feature requests from a very high value customer, we have to think about, well, what users, if their needs are met, are going to have the highest impact to the company. Now, in many cases, that ends up being the decision makers, which is somewhat difficult to deal with because they are in some ways the user that is least hands-on with the product. And of course, that involves working with sales and marketing and saying, well, okay, how much of this is going to go into the product with things like I mentioned before, demo mode and things like that, versus how much of this can we just communicate in sales collateral or marketing material. But so the principle would be, well, first follow the money and make sure that remember that these are business decisions at some point. The other thing is, I mentioned that there's somewhat of a link between in the value chain. If you have various users, like the developer is going to be passing it on to the end users, and it's often easy to forget the middle links in the chain. We can think of where we're at here at one end and the end user at the other, and we're thinking about the end user, but identifying where the weakest link is often helpful in trying to prioritize. Well, okay, we've been ignoring this part. Our end users love this, but our developers hate it. We have to fix something there. So again, there's going to be a lot of variation based on the situation that any product or team is in. But I think those two principles, follow the money and identify the weakest link, can often point us in the right direction.
Okay, so you go along the chain and you make sure that all the links are there in your development process, and then you start to strengthen them. Is it like that?
Right. If in some cases it's kind of a risk assessment that you can say where are we most likely? Where is the most likely point of failure? And sometimes a point of failure may look more like a bottleneck. Where are people in the value chain when we create this product and it goes to market and it's flowing through the various steps that it has to to get to the end user? Where is it taking longest, or where is it having the hardest time? And then strengthen that or solve for that, or in the next sprint make specific user stories and development priorities that address those needs that have been identified.
Okay, we will go to the Q&A in a few minutes, and I just wanted to remind our audience, dear Digitale Leute, you can send questions to the chat, and we will hand them over to Casey in a few minutes. Casey, B2B2C is kind of a trend. B2B SaaS is growing very, very fast. If I want to start, or if I want to make sure that I did not forget anyone in my value chain, that I have all my user groups ready, which tools do you recommend? How do you start?
So the conceptual tool that I recommend is just the concept of user story mapping. So user stories are kind of a fundamental unit of agile methodology, and they're really just sentences. And so I'm not recommending any particular tool or app or anything. This is really just in the basics of you can do this with pen and paper, you can do this in a spreadsheet, you can do it in whatever. But a user story is going to identify the user, it's going to articulate a need or a requirement of that user, and it's going to have an objective or a goal that requirement fulfills to some extent. So oftentimes that first section of like, who's the user, as a caller, as a callee, as a user, as a website visitor, as a whatever, that's often the easiest one to fill out because, well, it's obvious who your user is. And what I would suggest is, well, maybe it's not so obvious. There's going to be one category that's going to be very obvious. What are the other categories of users that are not obvious? And think through those. And, if you do want to look at specific tools, you can Google user story mapping. I won't recommend any particular one, but that concept is there's some solutions out of there. Some of them, may meet certain needs better than others. But the idea of taking these user stories and then mapping them either to features or to themes of development or to other ideas like that, I think that would be the single most useful, starting point of approaching this B2B2C idea is start with writing user stories, remember who all your users are, and then start mapping them up into product elements.
Okay, so you scribble the chain, right?
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the chain, and within each category there's going to be a variety, but then seeing how they are interconnected, what the flow is. Not all of them are going to be connected in flow. If you're meeting needs in different industries, those are going to be lateral, and of course, then based on revenue or whatever, you'd prioritize that differently. But identifying the ones that are linked to each other especially in the B2B2C way, it's like you have your C users and your B users, and let's figure out how they're connected, and let's connect the dots.
Who should I talk to find that out? Who could be aware of users I've forgotten?
So I think actually talking to sales and customer success are usually a gold mine of information for trying to map out that process. Customer success, because they're often focused on the B side, and they're listening to the customers, and they're saying, okay, well, our customers need this, we need that, and they're approaching it not from a product development perspective. They're doing it from a relationship management perspective, or from they have other things that they're thinking about. But by listening to what their observations are, thinking about it in a product development perspective, a lot of these things will become much more clear.
Okay. Thank you so much for that point. I will hand over to the questions. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have questions from the audience. One question is, what is the primary use case of Sendbird, and is it mostly used by mobile apps?
Okay, so Sendbird primary use case, chat, in-app chat is our bread and butter right now. I would say the majority of our customers do use it in mobile apps. However, we also have an SDK designed just for the web, so websites and web apps also use it. And we try to be as versatile and as cross-platform compatible as we can.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, do we have more questions?
Yes, we have some more questions. One question is, why is it that most of the product team is based in South Korea, and how big is the product team at Sendbird?
Good question. So Sendbird was actually founded in Korea by a team of four people, all of whom are Korean, and the history kind of took a lot of twists and turns. Sendbird is now officially incorporated in the United States, but there was always a core of engineering and also management that that continued in Korea. So it's largely a Korean American company. As far as the product team, we have the team that's comprised of product managers is we have about 5 of us right now. The engineering team is substantially larger. I don't have a head count in front of me. I would wager somewhere around 80 is what don't quote me on that though.
Okay, I'm sure there's more. We have a very, very active audience today.
Yeah, there's one more question regarding your product team and your development structure. So how are the teams structured exactly? So you said now there are 5 product managers and a lot more engineers. So how is the organization there?
Yeah, so our the product team itself is we have a head of product, and then we have product managers that are assigned to the core products that we offer at Sendbird. So the primary one being chat is our major one. Calls is the one that I oversee, and that one's a relatively new offering. We also have a customer service portal for called Sendbird Desk, which uses our chat technology to be able to process help desk tickets and things like that. So we have a product manager for that, and then we have another one for UI Kit, which is the user interface components that can plug directly into our API. So we have those 4 actual product managers that are assigned to the products themselves. And then there's usually a product team, engineering teams associated with each of those products. In some cases with infrastructure, there's some overlap in terms of what product they focus on. And within those product teams, we have both client and server roles, in addition to the design and the UX team, which also covers multiple products.
Okay, thank you to the audience for all your questions. Thank you for your answers and for being here, Casey. Until I let you go, do you have any resources for anyone in the Digitale Leute community who wants to start and dive deeper?
I'll mention one book by Bruce McCarthy. It's called Product Roadmaps Relaunched. It was very influential in my thinking as I was getting into this. It's largely a book about road mapping, but it gets into a lot of the ideas that I discussed about user stories and about grouping them into themes and identifying user needs and whatnot, as opposed to technical product requirements. So I would definitely recommend that book. Also, at Sendbird, we occasionally do webinars. I was actually able to interview Bruce McCarthy. You can go on Sendbird in the marketing portal. You can watch that interview. Also, I'll just name drop a few others that have some authors that have written influential books. Marty Kagan, Matt LeMay, Stephen Haynes. You can read their books, and there's interviews with them on Sendbird.com also. And then Ryan Hoover, if you don't follow him on Twitter, please do. He's the founder of Product Hunt, a lot of interesting product community discussions that he's part of.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Looking forward to talk to you again maybe next year, and I wish you a great afternoon at Digitale Leute Summit. Bye.
Thank you.